Elena Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she finished scrubbing the marble floors of the Grand Hotel lobby. Her knees ached from hours of cleaning, but she couldn't complain. At 19, she was the sole provider for her younger brother Miguel, who was only 12. Their mother had disappeared when Elena was 15, leaving behind nothing but questions and a single photograph that Elena kept hidden in her worn leather wallet. The photograph showed a beautiful woman with dark hair and gentle eyes, wearing an elegant dress that Elena had never seen before. On the back, written in faded ink, were the words "Maria Elena Martinez, always remember who you are." Elena had stared at that picture countless times, wondering where her mother had gone and why she had left them behind in the slums of San Miguel. Life in the poorest district of the city was harsh. Elena worked 3 jobs, cleaning at the hotel in the morning, serving food at a small restaurant during lunch, and washing dishes at another establishment until late at night. Miguel helped by collecting recyclable materials from the streets, but it was barely enough to pay rent for their tiny one-room apartment and put food on the table. One rainy Thursday evening, Elena was walking home from her dishwashing job when she noticed a crowd gathered around a newspaper stand. People were talking excitedly about something, pointing at the front page of the evening paper. Curious, Elena pushed through the crowd to see what had captured everyone's attention. The headline read, "Mysterious Vampire Monarch Opens Palace Doors for First Time in Decades, Rare Photographs Inside." Elena rolled her eyes. The city had always been full of strange legends about vampires and supernatural creatures living in the old palace on the hill. Most people dismissed these stories as folklore, but some swore they had seen pale figures moving through the palace windows at night. Elena had never paid attention to such tales, she was too busy trying to survive. But something made her look closer at the newspaper photograph. The image showed the interior of what appeared to be an incredibly luxurious palace, with crystal chandeliers, gold-framed paintings, and marble statues. The caption mentioned that a reclusive figure known only as the Monarch had allowed a single photographer inside for the first time in over 50 years. Elena was about to turn away when her eyes fell on something that made her blood freeze. In the background of one photograph, hanging prominently on a wall among other portraits, was a painting that looked exactly like her mother. She snatched the newspaper from the stand, ignoring the vendor's protests about payment. Her hands trembled as she held the paper close to her face, studying the image carefully. There was no mistake, the woman in the painting had the same dark hair, the same gentle eyes, the same delicate features as the mother in Elena's treasured photograph. "Hey, you have to pay for that," the newspaper vendor shouted, but Elena was already running down the street, clutching the paper against her chest. When she reached her apartment, Miguel was waiting with a concerned expression. He had prepared a simple dinner of rice and beans, their usual meal when money was tight. "Elena, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost," Miguel said, noticing his sister's pale face and shaking hands. Elena spread the newspaper on their small wooden table and pointed to the photograph. "Look at this, Miguel. Look at the painting on the wall." Miguel leaned closer, squinting at the image. His eyes widened as he recognized the familiar features. That looks like Mama. It's not just similar, Miguel. It's exactly her. Every detail, every feature. How is this possible?" Elena pulled out her wallet and placed their mother's photograph next to the newspaper image. The resemblance was undeniable. The two siblings spent the entire night discussing what this could mean. Had their mother somehow been connected to this mysterious palace? Was she still alive? Why would her portrait be hanging in the home of someone called the Vampire Monarch? The next morning, Elena made a decision that would change her life forever. She would go to the palace and demand answers. She didn't care about the strange stories or the warnings people gave about that place. She needed to know the truth about her mother. Elena had heard that the palace was located on Crimson Hill, about 5 miles outside the city. She had never been there before, but she was determined to make the journey. She asked her supervisor at the hotel for the day off, claiming she was sick. It was the first time she had ever lied to get out of work, but this was more important than any job. She wore her best clothes, a simple blue dress that had belonged to her mother, and a pair of worn but clean shoes. Miguel wanted to come with her, but Elena insisted he stay home and go to school. She didn't know what she might encounter at the palace, and she wanted to keep her brother safe. The journey to Crimson Hill was longer and more difficult than Elena had expected. She took a bus to the edge of the city, but from there she had to walk several miles along a winding dirt road. The path led through dense forest, and, with each step, the trees seemed to grow taller and darker. As she climbed higher up the hill, Elena noticed that the temperature was dropping, even though it was supposed to be a warm spring day. The birds that had been chirping cheerfully at the beginning of her journey had fallen silent. Even the insects seemed to have disappeared. The only sound was her footsteps crunching on fallen leaves and twigs. After 3 hours of walking, Elena finally reached the top of Crimson Hill. Before her stood a massive iron gate, at least 12 feet tall, with intricate designs that seemed to twist and move when she wasn't looking directly at them. Beyond the gate, she could see the palace itself, an enormous structure of dark stone that seemed to absorb the sunlight rather than reflect it. The palace was unlike anything Elena had ever seen. It had dozens of towers and spires reaching toward the sky, with windows that looked like dark, watching eyes. Gothic arches and flying buttresses gave it an ancient, otherworldly appearance. Despite its obvious age, every stone looked perfectly preserved, as if time itself couldn't touch this place. Elena approached the gate nervously. There was no doorbell or intercom system that she could see. She reached out to touch the iron bars, and the moment her fingers made contact, the gate began to swing open with a loud, creaking sound that echoed through the forest. Her heart pounding, Elena stepped through the gateway and onto the palace grounds. The gate immediately swung shut behind her with a resounding clang. She tried to push it open again, but it wouldn't budge. There was no turning back now. The path to the palace entrance was paved with black marble and lined with strange, twisted trees that had no leaves. As Elena walked toward the massive wooden doors of the palace, she noticed that her footsteps seemed unnaturally loud in the complete silence that surrounded her. The palace doors were at least 20 feet tall and carved with symbols that Elena didn't recognize. They looked ancient, as if they had been standing there for centuries. Elena raised her hand to knock, but before she could touch the wood, the doors began to open by themselves. A tall figure appeared in the doorway. It was a man, probably in his 30s, with pale skin and dark hair. He wore an expensive-looking black suit and moved with an elegant grace that Elena had never seen before. His eyes were an unusual shade of silver, and they seemed to pierce right through her. "Miss Martinez," the man said in a smooth, cultured voice. "We have been expecting you." Elena's breath caught in her throat. How did he know her name? She hadn't told anyone she was coming here. I don't understand," she stammered. "How do you know who I am?" The man smiled, revealing teeth that seemed unusually sharp. "Please, come inside. Lord Sebastian will explain everything." Elena hesitated. Every instinct told her to run, but she had come too far to turn back now. She needed answers about her mother, and this mysterious palace seemed to hold the key. "Lord Sebastian?" she asked. "The Monarch," the man explained. "He has been waiting for you for a very long time." Elena followed the man through the palace doors and into a grand entrance hall that took her breath away. The ceiling stretched up at least 4 stories high, supported by massive marble columns. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft, ethereal light that seemed to come from nowhere. Paintings lined the walls, hundreds of them, depicting people from different time periods wearing clothes from various centuries. As they walked through corridor after corridor, Elena noticed that all the paintings seemed to be watching her. Their eyes followed her movement, and she could swear she saw some of them moving slightly when she wasn't looking directly at them. "Don't be alarmed by the portraits," the man said, noticing her unease. "They are simply curious about visitors. We don't get many guests here." "What is this place?" Elena whispered, overwhelmed by the opulence around her. "This is Shadowmere Palace, home of Lord Sebastian Blackthorn, the last of the vampire monarchs," the man replied matter-of-factly, as if he were discussing the weather. Elena stopped walking. "Vampire monarchs? You're not serious." The man turned to look at her with those strange silver eyes. "Miss Martinez, you have come here seeking answers about your mother. I assure you, those answers are far more extraordinary than anything you could imagine. But, first, you must be willing to accept that the world is not exactly as you have always believed it to be." Elena's mind was racing. Vampires weren't real, they were just stories, legends, movies. But she was standing in this impossible palace, surrounded by paintings that seemed alive, talking to a man whose eyes looked like liquid mercury. "I don't believe in vampires," she said firmly. "That is perfectly understandable," the man replied. "But belief is not necessary for truth. Come, Lord Sebastian is waiting in the portrait gallery. That is where you will find the answers you seek about your mother." They continued walking through the palace, passing room after room filled with ancient furniture, priceless artwork, and strange artifacts that Elena couldn't identify. Everything was immaculately clean and perfectly preserved, despite the obvious age of the palace. Finally, they reached a pair of ornate double doors made of dark wood and decorated with gold inlay. The man placed his hand on the handles and paused. "Miss Martinez, what you are about to see will change your understanding of everything you thought you knew about your life, your mother, and your own identity. Are you prepared for that?" Elena thought about Miguel waiting at home, about their tiny apartment and their constant struggle to survive. She thought about the mysterious photograph she had carried for so many years and all the questions that had haunted her dreams. Whatever lay beyond these doors, it couldn't be worse than not knowing the truth. "Yes," she said. "I'm ready." The doors swung open, revealing an enormous room lined from floor to ceiling with portraits. But Elena's attention was immediately drawn to the figure standing at the far end of the gallery. He was tall and imposing, with jet black hair and skin so pale it seemed to glow in the dim light. He wore a long black coat over dark clothing, and his presence filled the entire room with an aura of ancient power. His eyes were the deepest red Elena had ever seen, like rubies filled with fire. But what made Elena gasp and take a step backward was not his otherworldly appearance. It was the fact that he was standing directly beneath a massive portrait of her mother, not a painting that looked like her mother, but an exact, perfect representation of Maria Elena Martinez, wearing the same elegant dress from the photograph Elena carried. "Welcome, Elena," the figure said in a voice that seemed to echo through her very soul. "My name is Sebastian Blackthorne, and I have been waiting 300 years to meet you." Elena stared at Sebastian Blackthorne in complete shock, her mind struggling to process his words. 300 years? That was impossible. No human being could live that long. And yet, as she looked into his ancient red eyes, she could see centuries of experience and pain reflected there. "You're insane," Elena whispered, backing toward the door. "People don't live for 300 years. This is all some kind of elaborate joke or scam." Sebastian moved with inhuman speed, appearing beside her before she could blink. He didn't touch her, but his presence was so overwhelming that Elena felt frozen in place. "Look at the portrait, Elena," Sebastian said gently. "Really look at it. Study every detail and tell me what you see." Against her better judgment, Elena found herself turning to examine the massive painting. The woman in the portrait was undeniably her mother, but, as Elena looked more closely, she noticed details that hadn't been visible in the newspaper photograph. The dress was made of silk and velvet, clearly expensive and tailored perfectly. The jewelry was real diamonds and emeralds that caught the light even in the painting. But, most importantly, in the bottom corner of the portrait, Elena could see a date painted in tiny gold numbers, 1724. "That's impossible," Elena breathed. "My mother was born in 1978. She was only 40 when she disappeared." Sebastian walked slowly around the portrait gallery, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. "Elena, what I am about to tell you will sound impossible, but I need you to listen with an open mind. Your mother, Maria Elena Martinez, was not who you believed her to be." "Stop it," Elena said, her voice rising. "Don't you dare talk about my mother. She was a good woman who worked hard to take care of Miguel and me. She wasn't some character from a fantasy story. She was indeed a good woman," Sebastian agreed. "One of the best I have ever known. But she was also Isabella Catherine Blackthorne, and she was my wife." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. She stumbled backward, catching herself against the wall. "That's not possible. You're lying." Sebastian continued as if she hadn't spoken. "Isabella was born in 1702, the daughter of a Spanish nobleman. When she was 22 years old, she became gravely ill with consumption. The doctors said she had only days to live. Her father came to me, desperate to save his daughter's life. He had heard rumors about my abilities. What abilities? Elena asked, despite herself. The ability to grant immortality, Sebastian replied. At a cost. Elena shook her head violently. This is insane. Vampires aren't real. Immortality isn't real. You're either crazy or you're trying to trick me somehow. Sebastian sighed deeply, a sound filled with centuries of weariness. I know how it sounds, Elena. But I am going to show you something that will prove everything I'm telling you. He walked to an ornate desk in the corner of the gallery and retrieved a thick leather-bound book. The cover was worn with age, and the pages looked yellowed and fragile. Sebastian opened it carefully and gestured for Elena to come closer. This is the record of every vampire I have ever created, Sebastian explained. Each entry contains their full name, the date of their transformation, and their complete history. Elena approached reluctantly, her curiosity overcoming her fear. The book was filled with handwritten entries in various languages and different styles of writing. The pages seemed to span centuries, documenting hundreds of names and dates. Sebastian turned to a page near the middle of the book and pointed to an entry. In elegant script, Elena read, Isabella Catherine Montoya, transformed September 15, 1724. Reason, terminal consumption. Status, beloved wife. Below the entry was a detailed drawing of the same woman from the portrait, along with notes describing her personality, her interests, and her life before and after her transformation. This still doesn't prove anything, Elena said, though her voice lacked conviction. You could have created this book recently and made up all these stories. Sebastian nodded patiently. You're right to be skeptical. But let me tell you about your mother's life, details that only someone who lived with her for centuries could know. He began to speak, and Elena found herself drawn into his story despite her disbelief. Isabella loved to paint, Sebastian said. She spent hours in the palace studio, creating beautiful landscapes and portraits. She had a small scar on her left hand from a childhood accident with a kitchen knife. She was terrified of thunderstorms but loved the rain. She had a habit of humming when she was concentrating, always the same melody, a Spanish lullaby her grandmother had taught her. Elena's breath caught in her throat. Her mother had indeed hummed that exact same lullaby, always when she was cooking or cleaning. And she did have a small scar on her left hand, though she had always told Elena it was from a work accident. She also, Sebastian continued, watching Elena's face carefully, had a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon on her right shoulder blade. Elena's knees went weak. Her mother had indeed had that exact birthmark. She had seen it countless times when her mother changed clothes. There was no way this stranger could know such an intimate detail unless. How do you know about the birthmark? Elena whispered. Because I traced it with my finger almost every night for 200 years, Sebastian replied softly. Because Isabella was the love of my immortal life, and losing her was the greatest pain I have ever endured. Elena sank into a nearby chair, her head spinning. Even if what you're saying is true, which I'm not saying it is, what happened to her? Why did she leave us? Sebastian's expression grew sad, and, for a moment he looked far older than his physical appearance suggested. That is a long and complicated story, Elena. But, the short answer is that Isabella chose to become human again. That's possible? Under very specific circumstances, yes. But, it comes with a terrible price. Sebastian walked to the window and gazed out at the darkening sky. You see, when a vampire chooses to return to mortality, they lose all their memories of their immortal life. They become completely human, with a human lifespan, and they remember nothing of who they once were. Elena felt tears beginning to form in her eyes. So she forgot about you? She forgot this place? She forgot everything. But, more than that, the process of returning to humanity is extremely dangerous. Most vampires who attempted die during the transformation. Isabella survived, but the trauma of the change affected her mind. She wandered for months, not knowing who she was or where she came from. How did she end up in San Miguel? How did she meet my father? Sebastian turned back to face her. She was found by a kind man named Carlos Martinez, a construction worker who lived in the city. He took care of her, helped her create a new identity, and eventually fell in love with her. She married him and took his name, never knowing that she had once been Isabella Blackthorne, vampire nobility. Elena wiped tears from her cheeks. But she remembered the lullaby. She had the same birthmark. How is that possible? Physical characteristics and deeply ingrained behaviors often survive the transformation. The lullaby was something she had hummed for centuries. It was part of her soul, not just her memory. But she had no conscious recollection of her life here, or of me. Then, how did you know about us? How did you know she had children? Sebastian smiled sadly. I never stopped watching over her, Elena. From a distance, always from a distance. I knew when she married Carlos. I knew when she gave birth to you, and, later to Miguel. I celebrated every milestone in your lives, even though she would never know I existed. Elena stood up abruptly, anger flashing in her eyes. If you cared so much, why didn't you help us? Do you have any idea how hard our lives were? How much we struggled? We were poor, Sebastian. We went to bed hungry more nights than I can count. Where were you then? Sebastian's face crumpled with pain. I wanted to help. You have no idea how many times I started toward your neighborhood with money, with resources, with everything you needed. But I couldn't risk it. Why not? Because my presence in her life, even indirectly, could have triggered her memories. And if Isabella remembered who she truly was, if she recalled her vampire nature while trapped in a human body, the psychological shock could have killed her. Elena sank back into the chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was hearing. So you just watched us suffer. It was the hardest thing I have ever done in 3 centuries of existence, Sebastian said quietly. But I loved her too much to risk her life, even to ease her poverty. Then, why did she disappear 4 years ago? What happened to her? Sebastian was quiet for a long moment, and Elena could see him struggling with some internal pain. Isabella began having dreams, he finally said. Strange, vivid dreams about this palace, about me, about her life as a vampire. The mental barriers that protected her from her memories were beginning to weaken. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Her mother had indeed mentioned having strange dreams in the months before she disappeared. Dreams about castles and mysterious men with red eyes. She came here, Sebastian continued. One night, she showed up at the palace gates, just as you did today. She said she had been having dreams about this place and needed to understand what they meant. What did you do? I told her the truth. All of it. Just as I'm telling you now. Sebastian's voice was barely above a whisper. And it broke her mind. Elena gasped. What do you mean? The shock of remembering centuries of existence, of realizing what she had been and what she had lost, was too much for her human mind to handle. She went into a kind of psychological collapse. She couldn't speak, couldn't eat, couldn't function. Where is she now? Elena demanded, jumping to her feet. Is she here? Is she alive? Sebastian looked at her with infinite sadness. She is alive, Elena. But she is not the woman you remember, nor is she the Isabella I once knew. She exists in a state between human and vampire, between memory and forgetting. She recognizes nothing and no one. Elena felt as if the floor was falling away beneath her feet. I want to see her. Elena, I don't think that's wise. I don't care what you think is wise. Elena shouted. She's my mother. I've been looking for her for 4 years, wondering if she was dead or alive, blaming myself for not being a better daughter. If she's here, I want to see her right now. Sebastian studied her face for a long moment. Very well. But, I must warn you, Elena, she will not recognize you. She may not even respond to your presence. The woman you're about to see is not the mother who raised you. Elena straightened her shoulders with determination. I don't care. Take me to her. Sebastian led Elena through more corridors, deeper into the palace. They passed rooms filled with ancient books, laboratories with strange equipment, and chambers that seemed to serve no purpose Elena could understand. Finally, they reached a door made of white oak, carved with gentle, flowing designs unlike the Gothic architecture of the rest of the palace. "She is in here," Sebastian said softly. This room was specially designed to be calming and peaceful. "I hoped it might help her mind heal, but..." He opened the door, and Elena stepped inside. The room was beautiful, decorated in soft colors with comfortable furniture and large windows that let in natural light. Gardens were visible outside, filled with flowers and singing birds. It was like stepping into a different world from the dark, imposing atmosphere of the rest of the palace. In a chair by the window sat a woman Elena almost didn't recognize. Her mother's dark hair had turned completely gray, and she looked much older than her 42 years. She was staring out at the gardens with vacant eyes, showing no awareness of their presence. "Mama?" Elena whispered. The woman didn't respond. She continued gazing out the window as if Elena hadn't spoken. Elena walked closer, her heart breaking. "Mama, it's me. It's Elena." Still nothing. Elena knelt beside the chair and gently took her mother's hand. It was cold and lifeless. "She hasn't spoken in over 3 years, Sebastian said quietly. "The doctors I brought in said her mind simply couldn't reconcile the contradiction between her human memories and her vampire past. She retreated completely inward." Elena looked up at Sebastian with tears streaming down her face. "There has to be something we can do. Some way to help her." Sebastian knelt beside Elena and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I have tried everything, Elena. The best doctors, the most powerful magic, every treatment that exists in both the human and supernatural worlds. Nothing has worked." "Then, why am I here?" Elena demanded. "Why did you say you were waiting for me? If there's nothing I can do, why bring me here at all?" Sebastian stood and walked to the window, looking out at the same gardens that held his wife's vacant attention. "Because, Elena, you are not entirely human yourself." Elena's blood turned to ice. "What are you talking about? When Isabella chose to become human, she was already pregnant with you. You were conceived while she was still a vampire, but born after her transformation. You are something that has never existed before in the history of my kind, a half-vampire, born of a mother who was immortal at conception but human at birth." Elena shook her head violently. No, that's not possible. I'm human. I'm completely human. Have you never wondered why you're so much stronger than other people your age?" Sebastian asked. "Why you can work 3 jobs without exhaustion? Why you heal from injuries so quickly? Why you can see perfectly in the dark?" Elena opened her mouth to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. She had always been unusually strong. She did recover from cuts and bruises much faster than Miguel or her friends. And she had never needed a flashlight at night, she could see clearly even in complete darkness. "You are the key, Elena," Sebastian continued. "Your unique nature means you might be able to reach your mother in ways that no one else can. Your blood carries both human and vampire characteristics. If I could use it to create a specialized treatment." "You want to use my blood to cure her?" "Not exactly cure, but possibly bridge the gap between her human and vampire memories. Help her mind find a way to exist peacefully with both sets of experiences." Elena looked back at her mother, still staring vacantly out the window. "Would it work?" "I don't know," Sebastian admitted. "It has never been attempted before. And there would be risks to both you and to her." "What kind of risks?" Sebastian hesitated. "The process would require me to temporarily awaken your vampire characteristics more fully. You would experience some of what it means to be immortal, the enhanced senses, the strength, the connection to supernatural energies. But I don't know if your human side could handle that transformation, even temporarily." "And for her?" "If it works, she might regain her sanity and her memories. She could become the woman you remember, or possibly even remember her life as Isabella." but if it fails, the shock could kill her outright. Elena stood up slowly, her mind racing through everything she had learned. Her mother was here, but lost in her own mind. Elena herself was apparently some kind of half-vampire creature she had never known existed. And the only chance to save her mother was a dangerous, experimental procedure that could kill them both. She looked at Sebastian, this ancient being who claimed to have loved her mother for centuries. Despite the impossibility of everything he had told her, she found herself believing him. Too many details matched, too many things made sense that had never made sense before. "If I agree to try this," Elena said slowly, "what happens to Miguel? He's only 12 years old. He needs someone to take care of him. If something goes wrong, I give you my word that Miguel will be provided for. He will want for nothing for the rest of his life. I will ensure he receives the best education, the best opportunities, everything you would want for him." Elena nodded, then looked back at her mother one more time. The woman who had raised her, who had worked so hard to give her children a better life, who had disappeared without explanation, leaving Elena to wonder and worry for 4 long years. "When do we start?" Elena asked. Sebastian led Elena to a different part of the palace, through corridors she hadn't seen before. This section felt older somehow, with stone walls that seemed to pulse with ancient energy. They descended a spiral staircase that went deep underground, lit by torches that burned with an unusual blue flame. "This is the ceremonial chamber," Sebastian explained as they reached a heavy wooden door at the bottom of the stairs. "It's where all the most important vampire rituals have taken place for over 1,000 years." The room beyond was circular, with a domed ceiling covered in intricate carvings that seemed to move in the flickering torchlight. In the center was a raised platform made of black marble, surrounded by symbols that Elena didn't recognize but that somehow felt familiar. "Before we begin," Sebastian said, turning to face Elena, "I need you to understand exactly what you're agreeing to. The process I'm about to perform will temporarily unlock the vampire aspects of your nature. You will experience things that no human has ever felt, powers and sensations that could be overwhelming." Elena nodded, though her heart was pounding with fear. "What exactly will happen to me?" "Your senses will become incredibly sharp. You'll be able to hear conversations from miles away, see in complete darkness, smell emotions in the air. Your physical strength will increase dramatically, you'll be strong enough to lift a car over your head if you wanted to. And you'll be able to feel the life force of every living creature around you." That sounds terrifying. It can be, especially the first time. But, Elena, you also need to know that once we begin this process, there's no going back. Even if we reverse the immediate effects, your vampire nature will always be closer to the surface than it is now. You'll never be completely human again. Elena thought about her life in the slums with Miguel, working 3 jobs just to survive, watching her little brother go to bed hungry more nights than she could count. Then, she looked around at the impossible palace, at the evidence of a world she had never imagined existed. "What kind of life would I have if this works?" she asked. Sebastian smiled for the first time since she had arrived. "Any kind of life you want, Elena. You would be wealthy beyond your wildest dreams. You could give Miguel every opportunity you've ever wanted for him. You could travel the world, learn anything you desire, experience wonders that most humans never even imagine. And the cost? You would have to live with the knowledge of what you truly are. You would be part of a very small, very exclusive world. And..." Sebastian hesitated. "If the process fully awakens your vampire nature, you would eventually need to feed on blood to survive." Elena's stomach turned. Human blood? Not necessarily. Many modern vampires survive on animal blood, or even synthetic alternatives I've developed in my laboratories. But, yes, eventually you would need blood of some kind. Elena closed her eyes, trying to imagine a life so different from everything she had known. When she opened them again, her resolve was firm. "None of that matters if we can't save my mother. Let's begin." Sebastian nodded and walked to a cabinet built into the stone wall. He removed several items, ornate silver bowls, strange bottles filled with colored liquids, and ancient books written in languages Elena had never seen. "I need to prepare your mother first," Sebastian said. "The servant who brought you here, Marcus, will go get her and bring her to the chamber. While we wait, I'll explain exactly what will happen. Marcus appeared as if summoned, though Elena hadn't heard Sebastian call for him. He bowed slightly and left the chamber without speaking. The ritual involves mixing your blood with several rare substances, Sebastian explained as he began arranging items on the marble platform. This mixture will create a potion that should help bridge the gap between your mother's human and vampire memories. But, for it to work, your vampire characteristics need to be fully active during the process. How do you activate them? Sebastian picked up a small, ornate dagger with symbols carved into the blade. I will make a small cut on your palm and allow a few drops of your blood to fall onto this activation stone. He pointed to a black crystal embedded in the platform. The stone has been charged with vampire energy for centuries. When your blood touches it, it will awaken every supernatural ability you possess. Will it hurt? The cut itself will be minor. But, the awakening. Elena, I won't lie to you. It will be the most intense experience of your life. Every sensation will be magnified 100 times. You may feel like you're losing your mind for a few moments. Elena nodded, trying to appear braver than she felt. And, then, what happens? Once your abilities are fully awakened, we'll collect more of your blood, about a cup's worth, and mix it with these other ingredients. Sebastian gestured to the bottles and herbs arranged on the platform. The resulting potion will need to be administered to your mother while you maintain physical contact with her. Your awakened vampire nature will help guide the magic to work properly. Marcus returned, gently leading Elena's mother into the chamber. The older woman walked obediently but without any awareness of her surroundings. She didn't react to seeing Elena or Sebastian, simply stood where Marcus positioned her and stared at the wall with vacant eyes. Elena's heart broke all over again seeing her mother this way. The vibrant, loving woman who had raised her was gone, replaced by this empty shell. Are you ready? Sebastian asked softly. Elena looked at her mother one more time, then nodded. I'm ready. Sebastian helped Elena onto the platform and positioned her hands over the black crystal. Remember, the moment your blood touches the stone, everything will change. Try to stay calm and trust me to guide you through it. Elena held out her hand, and Sebastian made a quick, clean cut across her palm. The pain was sharp but brief. As drops of her blood fell onto the crystal, the entire chamber was suddenly filled with blinding light. Elena screamed as every nerve in her body exploded with sensation. She could hear Sebastian's heartbeat, Marcus's breathing, even the sound of insects moving in the earth far above their heads. She could smell fear, determination, hope, and ancient magic swirling through the air. Her vision became so sharp that she could see individual dust particles floating in the air across the room. But, worst of all was the sudden awareness of life force, the pulsing energy that surrounded every living thing. She could feel Sebastian's immortal power like a blazing sun, Marcus's quieter vampire energy, and her mother's flickering, damaged human soul. Elena, look at me, Sebastian's voice cut through the chaos in her mind. Focus on my voice. Let me help you control this. Elena turned toward him, and, through her enhanced vision she could see him clearly for the first time. Sebastian wasn't just pale, his skin had an almost luminescent quality. His red eyes were literally glowing, and she could see the power radiating from him like heat waves. The sensory overload will pass, Sebastian said calmly. Your mind will learn to filter the input. Just breathe and let it happen. Gradually, Elena found that she could indeed control the flood of sensation. She was still incredibly aware of everything around her, but it no longer felt like it was driving her insane. How do you feel? Sebastian asked. Elena looked at her hands and was amazed to see that they were also glowing slightly with a silver light. I feel incredible. Like I could run 100 miles without getting tired. Like I could lift this entire palace if I wanted to. Good. Your vampire nature is fully awakened. Now we need to work quickly, we only have about an hour before the effects start to fade. Sebastian began mixing Elena's blood with the various ingredients he had prepared. As he worked, the mixture began to glow with the same silver light that surrounded Elena. The air in the chamber grew thick with magical energy. Now comes the difficult part, Sebastian said, handing Elena a silver chalice filled with the glowing potion. You need to help your mother drink this while maintaining physical contact with her throughout the process. As the magic works, you may see some of her memories, both human and vampire. Don't be frightened by what you witness. Elena approached her mother, who was still staring blankly at the wall. Mama, she said softly, placing one hand on her mother's shoulder and raising the chalice to her lips with the other. The moment the potion touched her mother's lips, the entire chamber exploded with light and energy. Elena found herself pulled into a whirlwind of images and memories that weren't her own. She saw her mother as Isabella, young and beautiful, dancing in grand ballrooms with Sebastian. She witnessed their wedding ceremony, conducted in this very chamber centuries ago. She experienced Isabella's joy at becoming immortal, and her deep love for the man who had saved her life. But Elena also saw darker memories: Isabella's growing sadness at watching human friends and family age and die while she remained unchanged. Her increasing isolation as the decades passed. The loneliness that came with immortality, despite Sebastian's love. Then, Elena saw the moment Isabella made her decision to become human again. The pain in Sebastian's eyes as she explained that she needed to experience mortality, to live a normal human life, even if it meant losing everything they had together. The memory shifted to show Isabella as Elena remembered her working in the factories of San Miguel, falling in love with Carlos Martinez, giving birth to Elena herself. Elena saw her mother's joy at being human, at experiencing the simple pleasures of mortality that she had forgotten during her centuries as a vampire. But she also saw her mother's confusion in the years before her disappearance, the strange dreams, the unexplained fears, the growing certainty that something important was missing from her life. Through it all, Elena could feel her mother's mind struggling to reconcile these conflicting sets of memories. The human Maria Elena who had raised her children in poverty, and the vampire Isabella who had lived in luxury for centuries, were fighting for control of the same consciousness. Help her, Elena heard Sebastian's voice as if from a great distance. Use your connection to both sides of her nature. Show her that she doesn't have to choose between them. Elena reached deeper into the magical connection, using her own half-vampire nature to bridge the gap between her mother's two identities. She projected feelings of love and acceptance, showing her mother that she could be both Maria Elena and Isabella, that both lives were valid and important. Slowly, Elena began to feel her mother's mind calming. The conflicting memories stopped fighting each other and began to merge into a single, coherent identity. The vacant stare in her mother's eyes began to clear. Elena, her mother whispered, the first word she had spoken in over 3 years. Yes, Mama, I'm here, Elena replied, tears streaming down her face. Her mother blinked several times, looking around the chamber with growing awareness. When her eyes fell on Sebastian, Elena saw recognition dawn in them, not fear or confusion, but deep, abiding love. Sebastian, she breathed. My husband. How long have I been lost? Too long, my beloved, Sebastian replied, moving to kneel beside them. But you're back now. Both versions of you, Isabella and Maria Elena. You don't have to lose either identity. Elena's mother looked back and forth between her daughter and her immortal husband. I remember everything now. Both lives, both loves. I remember raising you and Miguel, and I remember centuries with Sebastian. How is this possible? Elena made it possible, Sebastian explained. Your daughter is extraordinary, Isabella. She carries both human and vampire nature, and she was able to help your mind accept both sets of memories. Elena's mother reached out and touched her daughter's face with wonder. You're glowing, Mija. What has happened to you? It's a long story, Mama, Elena said with a smile. But the important thing is that you're back. You're yourself again. Both of my selves, her mother agreed. I can remember working 3 jobs to feed you and Miguel, and I can also remember dancing at royal courts in the 1800s. It should be impossible, but somehow it feels perfectly natural. Sebastian stood and helped both women to their feet. The question now is what happens next. Isabella, you are still human, the ritual didn't change that. But your memories have been restored, including your knowledge of our world. And Elena has awakened abilities that will never fully go dormant again. Elena looked at her mother, then at Sebastian. I know what I want to happen next. I want to bring Miguel here. I want him to know the truth about our family, and I want to give him the opportunities we never had growing up. And I want to be part of both worlds, her mother added. I want to spend time here with Sebastian, remembering and rebuilding what we had. But I also want to continue being a mother to my human children. I don't want to lose either life anymore. Sebastian smiled, and Elena could see centuries of loneliness lifting from his shoulders. That can be arranged. The palace is large enough for all of us, and there are ways to move between the human and vampire worlds safely. Over the next several hours, Sebastian explained how their new lives would work. Elena and Miguel would live primarily at the palace, but they would also maintain a residence in the city. Elena could continue her education. Sebastian had resources that would allow her to attend the best universities in the world. Miguel would be enrolled in excellent private schools. Elena's mother would spend time in both worlds as well. She would live with Sebastian as Isabella, rebuilding their centuries-old love, but she would also visit the city regularly as Maria Elena, maintaining her connections to the human world and her children. What about my vampire abilities? Elena asked. Will they get stronger? Probably, Sebastian admitted. As you get older, you may find that your supernatural characteristics become more pronounced. Eventually, you may need to make a choice about whether to fully embrace your vampire nature or find ways to suppress it. And if I choose to become fully vampire? Then, you would gain all the benefits: immortality, incredible power, wealth beyond measure. But, you would also take on all the responsibilities of our kind. And, you would outlive Miguel and any other human friends you make. Elena nodded thoughtfully. I don't have to decide right away, do I? No, Sebastian assured her. You have time. Decades, if you want them. 3 months later, Elena stood in the garden of Shadowmere Palace, watching Miguel chase fireflies with the delighted laughter she had feared she might never hear from him again. Their lives had changed dramatically, but in all the best ways. Miguel had adapted to their new circumstances with the resilience of childhood. He was enrolled in the best school in the city and was already showing remarkable academic improvement. He loved exploring the palace and listening to Sebastian's stories about history and science. Most importantly, he was well-fed, safe, and happy for the first time in his life. Elena had started taking university courses online, studying everything from literature to biology to art history. Sebastian was an incredible teacher, having actually lived through many of the historical events she was learning about. She was also slowly learning to control her enhanced abilities. She could now see in perfect darkness, lift incredible weights, and sense the emotions of people around her. Her mother divided her time between both identities with remarkable grace. As Isabella, she spent evenings with Sebastian, relearning the dances and customs of vampire society. As Maria Elena, she helped Elena with her studies and continued to be the loving mother she had always been. The integration wasn't without challenges. Elena sometimes felt overwhelmed by her enhanced senses, and there were nights when she lay awake wondering what her life would have been like if she had never found that newspaper. Miguel occasionally asked difficult questions about why they had suddenly become wealthy, and Elena had to be careful about how much truth to reveal to a 12-year-old. But, overall, Elena knew they had been given an incredible gift. Not just wealth and comfort, but the truth about their family and the opportunity to be part of something larger than themselves. One evening, as Elena sat in the portrait gallery looking at the painting of her mother, Sebastian joined her. Any regrets? He asked. Elena considered the question seriously. Sometimes I wonder if I would have been happier never knowing the truth. Living a simple human life might have been easier. But, would it have been better? Elena looked around at the incredible palace that was now her home, thought about Miguel's laughter and her mother's restored sanity, considered all the opportunities that lay ahead of them. No, she said firmly. This is better. Complicated and sometimes frightening, but definitely better. Sebastian nodded. I'm glad you feel that way. Because I have something to tell you, Elena. Something I learned during the ritual that restored your mother's memories. What is it? You're not the only half-vampire in existence. During Isabella's pregnancy with you, I detected traces of similar energy signatures in other parts of the world. There are others like you out there, children born to parents who were vampire when they conceived but human when they gave birth. Elena's eyes widened. How many others? I'm not certain. Perhaps a dozen worldwide. But, Elena, if you're interested, we could find them. Help them understand what they are, just as we helped your mother understand her dual nature. Elena thought about other young people living in poverty or confusion, unaware of their supernatural heritage, struggling with abilities they didn't understand. Yes, she said without hesitation. I want to help them. Sebastian smiled. I hoped you would say that. You see, Elena, your story isn't ending, it's just beginning. You have the potential to become a bridge between the human and vampire worlds, helping others like yourself find their place in both. Elena looked at the portrait of her mother one more time, then turned to gaze out the window at the city lights in the distance. Somewhere out there were other half-vampires who needed help, other families torn apart by mysteries they couldn't understand. She thought about the impoverished girl who had walked up Crimson Hill just 3 months ago, carrying nothing but questions and determination. That girl had been looking for answers about her mother's disappearance. She had found those answers, but she had also discovered something much more valuable, a purpose that could help others find their own answers. Elena smiled as she felt her vampire abilities stirring, ready to be used not for personal gain but to help others who were lost and confused as she had once been. When do we start? She asked Sebastian. As if in response to her question, the wind carried the faint sound of crying from the city below. Elena's enhanced hearing picked up the voice of a young person, probably her own age, sobbing in frustration and fear. With her supernatural senses, she could detect something unusual about the person's energy signature, something that felt familiar. We start now, Sebastian said, having heard the same thing. Someone out there needs our help. Elena stood up, her purpose clear and her determination stronger than ever. She had found her mother, discovered her true nature, and saved her family. Now it was time to help others do the same. The impoverished girl who had once cleaned hotel floors was gone forever. In her place stood Elena Martinez Blackthorne, half-vampire protector of others like herself, ready to face whatever challenges the supernatural world might bring. And, for the first time in her life, Elena felt truly complete.